Hello and welcome on behalf of the Brown Women's Network. My name is Mary Kim Arnold, Brown class of 93, MFA 98, and current faculty in the nonfiction writing program in the English department here at Brown. I'm so pleased to be with you all today. The Brown Women's Network is proudly sponsored by the university's Women's Leadership Council, which strives to bring together Brown's community of more than 40,000 alumni, students, and staff to tap into our shared Brown contexts and connections for lifelong social, professional, and intellectual development. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that Brown University in Providence and my own home in Pawtucket, where I'm calling from, are on the unceded lands of the Narragansett people, for whom the effects of colonization, oppression, and assimilation continue to reverberate. As part of an educational program and as part of today's program, I think it's relevant to hold in mind those histories with which we may be less familiar and those stories we are less likely to know. Today's event is part of the Brown Women's Network series on alumni authors. We'll be hearing from Sunisa Manning, class of 2007, whose debut novel, A Good True Thai, was published last fall. A Good True Thai is set in Thailand during the 1970s student protest movement and tells the story of three young people whose paths converge and are swept up in an epic of idealism, love, and political upheaval. I'm honored and delighted to be here with Sunisa. We're not only both Brown alumni, but we're also both graduates of the MFA at Vermont College of Fine Arts. So it's a real treat to be together for this, Sunisa. Sunisa Manning was born and raised in Bangkok by Thai and American parents. Her work has appeared in national and international literary magazines, including Prairie Schooner, The Rumpus, the Mekong Review, and others. She's been honored with residencies at Hedgebrook and the Hambridge Center for the Arts. Sunisa was a 2017 Steinbeck Fellow at San Jose State and a 2018 Emerging Writer Fellow at the San Francisco Writers Grotto. A Good True Thai was a finalist for the Epigram Books Fiction Prize for Southeast Asian writers. It was published in Southeast Asia in September 2020, and it's amazing to be able to say that it went into a second printing in February. Please join me in welcoming Sunisa, who will read from A Good True Thai.
Thank you, Mary Kim, and thank you, Brown, and particularly the Brown Women's Network for having me today. I really appreciate it. It is beyond, a treat doesn't even really explain what it feels like to get to come home to Brown and feel so supported this way too. I'm really feeling the love. So thank you. I'm going to kick off with a reading, and it's it's in the middle of the book, which you almost never do, but this has to do with like women and well, I think it'll become clear why I read this section. So there are three main characters in this novel. Lek is the only female main character. So this is in the Lek section. And she is what in Thailand is called a commoner, which just means that she's not the nobility. She's a regular person. She's Chinese Thai, actually. And she's at this party at the house of what in the book, this guy is called the politician. Mostly my mother was worried that I could get in trouble if I named him because he's a historical person. And it's important to know, so she's younger, she's female, she's not noble. And the politician, of course, is older, male, and titled. And she's drunk. This is the first time she's had wine. I think this is also kind of a good feel for the book because they're going to talk a lot about a Thai intellectual, Chit Pumisak, who goes through the whole novel. And you kind of get a sense for how, in my book, political awakening is charted in a way through Chit Pumisak. And the novel's set in the 1970s, but that's actually true now. Young Thai people in university are reading Chit's writings and also becoming radicalized through it. So that's a nice echo. Lek accepts another glass of wine and doesn't have to fake her admiration for the cut plants twining in tiny pots. A fountain splashes over a dark statue. The politician, they say, is an arborist. His grounds a minor botanical collection purely for my own amusement. She's reminded of her high school, Matha, how pleasant it is in there, how civilized. The plants create a play of green that sets off the dark wood of the 5 teak houses and their deep orange tile roofs. The politician introduces her to his brother, who is as stringy as the politician is solid. They have matching glasses, but the brothers make him look scholarly, whereas no prop could diminish the politician's bouncing strides and infectious laugh. Lek accepts another glass of wine. They're sitting in a sala hut on bench swings that face each other, looking over a pond with delicately spiky lilies. The conversation is in English. As she talks, she notices that it is the politician who has the encyclopedic knowledge. She learns he is a writer. There's a cultivated man underneath his hearty appearance. Her French is better than her English, she is explaining. He doesn't speak that language. Oh, why? She cries, laughing that this man of means is missing the most cultured language of all. The brother excuses himself, saying he has to catch someone, and a servant appears, tray in hand. No, she shouldn't, but she should. They laugh and clink glasses. A party is a party after all. What are you reading? What do you work on? The politician asks, switching to Thai. Thai, the language of deference. She prefers French for poetry, English for brilliance. In Thai, she must defer. The language binds her to politeness, twists her into a little girl speaking to an older man, obliged to make herself small. Jit Pumisak, Lek answers. I said his name. Are you going to arrest me? She feels a thrill as she pushes herself to break the bounds of the language, taunting where really she must defer. Certainly not. You're allowed to speak of him right now, and I've read Jit's work, the politician says. I even met the man when he was alive. He kicks his legs and their swing rocks. Met him? Excitement fills her throat. Idiot to repeat what the politician already told her. What was he like? Lex shakes her head at this, the best question she can muster. He was hard, the politician says, stubborn. Jit crossed a line. He wouldn't apologize for the design of that damn yearbook. The one she will soon reissue, Lex thinks with a smile. He kept putting out tracts and pamphlets calling for the people to rise, the politician continues. Jit always managed to insult the highborns, even if you were trying to help him. If he'd waited a bit, bent a little, things might have turned out differently. Twin lines appear between the politician's eyebrows. It's a pity. They had to make an example out of him. He was the most brilliant thinker of his generation. You're willing to say that? Lex says. Definitely. He regards her. We aren't such a big country that we can waste minds like Jit's. Maybe he can be rehabilitated, Lex says. Oh? That was the wrong word. She waves her empty glass and the politician is kind enough to grab it. The students, right now, what we're doing, we wouldn't change anything about Jit, but we're going to make him more well known. Now, when, the old man smiles, when everything's allowed. She keeps talking. We'll make Jit famous again. His name will be known. So are you going to publish his work? A part of her shouts, but Lek glides over that internal clamor. We're printing it now, Lek says. It was a lot of work to get everything ready. Finding she has no glass, Lek raises her hand in an imaginary toast. He raises a real glass in return. Well done, he murmurs. I can't wait to read about it. And what of the communists? Have you made contact with them? And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sunisa. That was really a great teaser for the book. So we're going to have some time for questions from the audience, but before we do, I thought I could just begin the conversation. And, you know, when we spoke earlier in planning for this event, we were talking about wanting to acknowledge that that May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and that there has been, for many reasons, a lot of increased attention on stories and identity among the Asian American communities. And I guess I wonder if you could talk about a couple things, maybe a little bit about your own story in coming to writing, how you came to it. I have heard a few interviews, but I haven't heard you talk about that. What your early writing was like, and were you drawn to a particular kind of story to tell?
Yeah, I'd love to. I was sort of slower to writing, although as a lot of writers are, I love to read, but I never considered it something that I could do, which is both correct because it's not exactly a viable career. But it also speaks to the kind of family I come from. I come from an immigrant family, and I don't know, it just wasn't in my options. I don't know if I've talked about this a ton, but I actually thought I might be a writer when I was living in Australia. And it's significant to me that that's a country with a lot more social safety net. And there in Melbourne, a lot of my friends were artists, not writers, but mostly visual artists. And one of them, almost offhand was like, you're always sort of messing around with a short story. You're always reading. Do you ever think you might want to just do this? And yeah, for me, someone had to really put the idea into my head. Um, and of course, when Paul did, I mean, I was a post-colonial literature major at Brown. I read books. I'm thinking of Things Fall Apart, and then later Half of the Yellow Sun, which really changed. I don't even know what my idea of Nigeria had been before that, but for example, it really intimately changed how I felt about Nigeria, which is still a country I actually haven't been to. But it really, once I put that together, I kind of had this thing lodge in me that I couldn't shake. That I was like, oh, maybe I could be part of the people who could do this about Thailand, which is to make it more complex and real. Um, and my Brown education really gave me a critical lens with which to view part of the way that Thailand is typically depicted. So it all came together then, and I decided to go to grad school and ended up at Vermont College of Fine Arts, where I met you.
Did you have a sense then, we only overlapped a little bit, but I wonder if you had a sense then of the kind of work that you wanted to write, or, who you were influenced by at that point?
That was a kind of long and slow process. Typically grad school, you focused on craft, and we did. But I think speaking as a writer of color and a writer from elsewhere, I almost had to do what I kind of call a second MFA on my own as I try to figure out, in the case of my novel, I wrote it in English, which is the only language I could write it in, but it takes place, most of it, in Thai. When the characters are speaking English, as you heard, I tell you they're speaking English. I think that's the only time that happens. And so there's a very active translation that goes through that. Grad school is when I read The Russians. I write very politically, again, as you can probably tell, but I also think as a writer from a small country that has the most unequal wealth stratification in the world, everything is political. Choosing to tell a story that's only happening among the echelon of the nobility, which my family's not a part of, would be a political act too, like everything. So a professor talked about, I started to read The Russians, and I started to say, oh, a realist model is interesting to me. Tolstoy is someone that I modeled this first novel on a lot, because he's such an expansive writer and such a political writer, and able to kind of moralize and ruminate on values, which I think isn't so typical in American contemporary fiction, but I felt like that was really necessary, because the novel takes place between 1973 and 1976, at a time of a Thai student movement, a democracy movement. And so I needed models of books that could encompass the sort of debate. As adolescents come of age, you're thinking anyway about like, how should a person live, and what makes a life have dignity. And particularly at this time, and actually right now in Thailand, that is very much a topic.
Yeah. So that makes me think of a couple related questions. Your book involves so much research. It's drawn from so many historical sources and references actual historical events. I would love to hear a little bit just about your research process, what that was like, and whether there was anything surprising that you came upon.
Yes. I live in the Bay Area. I live really down the road from UC Berkeley's library. And there's a South and Southeast Asian library there, and I use those archives a lot to research. And then I drew remotely on Cornell's library. They have a very good one too. A lot, when I was writing this novel, and still today a little bit, but this took me 6 years, a lot of what happens in this 3-year period was considered taboo. And as someone raised in Thailand, I knew what had happened broadly, but when I went to the archive formally and in kind of a scholarly manner as an adult, dug through what had happened, and I used firsthand accounts scholarships of the period, and then some things that aren't, that, things that you couldn't read inside the kingdom comfortably. And there was a real process of me going through my own emotional and spiritual journey of accepting what the evidence in the archive told me. And here I'm being a little opaque, but this is being recorded. And making sure that I could write a book. I had to walk the line of political safety, but I really, once I did my research, had to think about my own privilege as well. I'm a Thai citizen and all my family lives there, but I'm also an American citizen and I live in the US. So the research process actually was the thing that brought forward my own decisions about how explicit I was going to be in the book, and about really, the monarchy and the monarchy's role and what happened, the monarchy's continuing power. Yeah, and that was a thing I had to also talk through with my family pretty extensively, which I'm just also going to say again, like, I don't think most American authors have to worry about that. And so there's just a lot of dimensionality that I went through for a first book. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm, because you are talking about those personal political tensions, certainly I think in the past year or so, a lot of us have been thinking about personal political and the ramifications of power and certain power structures, and that distinction, how and to what extent that can exist, right? And what it means that it might exist. And so I guess I'm wondering how you think of your role as a writer, and how you think writing and art can take up these issues and sort of illuminate them in really complex ways.
That's a great question. I think of myself personally as a bridge, as a dual citizen, as someone who's biracial. And, in the US, I notice people want to know if I'm fluent in Thai, which, like, maybe fluency is kind of a continuum. But I'm really bicultural. I was raised there and went to school in English all the time. So I think of my writing and the thing I can do very much as a bridge, because I think one of the central tensions in America too for Asian Americans is often, and not just Asian Americans, but often the rub between what people think largely, stereotypically, like a category of people, like what we are, and then the complexity within that. So to speak specifically about Thai-ness, which is my arena, of course, I deliberately didn't want a book with any white people in it and any foreigners. There aren't probably, very few people here have read any novels set in Thailand. And there are some wonderful ones translated, but not many, and they aren't widely distributed. And of course, my novel isn't published in the United States either. But generally, the beach might be something you think of. Like, Thailand is a country that, for some reason, like, foreign, usually men, have like permission to visit this country and then write some really, trashy tome about the beaches, the women, the corrupt monks, and give you like the real Bangkok. It kills me. And I struggle to think, I was trying to flip the analogy and be like, okay, so, only Saudis wrote about America, and they came and they were like, it's this crazy country where everyone drives trucks and carries guns. I mean, how reductive is that, And yet largely that's what we have about Thailand. And so my writing, I see it as a form of activism and healing, like a conscious effort to redress. And I'm so happy that it's gone into a second printing in Asia, because I think there's a real appetite for that, actually, and that some foreigners who love Thailand have known that they're missing local voices for a very long time, and they want to read that. So that's very encouraging.
You mentioned, of course, that you wrote it in English. It's the only language you could write it in, and which suggests an English audience, of course, an English-speaking audience. And I wonder, given the historical nature, given the fact that maybe many English-speaking readers wouldn't be familiar with some of this history, I wonder how you went about thinking about how much of it you needed to include to be legible to an English-speaking audience.
Yeah, that was part of my second MFA. I really had to think about because it wasn't really discussed, if you come from a group of dominance, whatever, category that is, you don't have to worry about this. Um, I think maybe my book, I mean, you tell me what you think. It makes more sense if you do think of it as translated in all ways, because I so consciously center Thai characters and Thai-ness, and they're all speaking to each other. I wanted to write a book that happened entirely inside the country that had almost no gaze. Speaking as someone who's been really spectated upon a lot growing up, but that presented some problems of how to explain and contextualize. And of course, in a historical book, in a political book, I think that is one of the real challenges of the novel, because I just stick you in it. Of course, if you began at the beginning, maybe you would feel like it was less in it. But so I do the thing where I don't italicize Thai words, but contextually will tell you what it means. I ask for sure for patience from readers to, the whole experience of reading is part of the process where I ask for patience that you know that you're not being centered and you sort of stick it out and maybe enjoy it. Like you're being allowed to see and eavesdrop on such a radical part of our history that a lot of Thai people are still coming out of feelings, I think, of taboo around these 3 years. I mean, it is not for nothing that the cover is a house on fire,
Yeah. I like what you said before about being a bridge in a way, and the idea of translating. And I think those two concepts really are helpful in thinking about this kind of work that is sort of insulated from the gaze, but also is open to or can accommodate the people who don't know the history as well. Mm-hmm. I have one more question, and then maybe we can turn it to audience questions. And this is going back to the passage that you read and a little bit about the language. We were talking before that you had said, Thai, when you speak, you're always ranking yourself in relation, and the persistence of class and relational ranking. And you suggested this in the reading that you did, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how that persistence of class and ranking is enacted in the book.
Yeah, in every way. I mean, I think there are about 6. So, if in a Western sense you're familiar with French or Spanish, where there's like the formal and the informal, I think in Thailand there are about 6 different rungs on the ladder, and you change. This is one of the things I love about Thai too, because it's more of a dance than a rigidity, but you change depending on where you are and where. So like Mary Kim, you and I would also be in this dance, and both people go up and down. But of course, as soon as you open your mouth, you're judging. You have to like put a point and say like, well, I'm probably older than you and probably wealthier than you, and I've definitely got the mail card, so that's cool. I'm going to be higher on the ladder, and I find that really complicated, and it's happening all the time with the characters in the book because they're speaking in Thai. When you speak informally, it's less so. So among the Chang, Det, and Lek, when they're talking and there's a lot of slang, like they're not always ranking each other, but when they first meet each other, Det is nobility, that is huge. Lek is an immigrant, that is huge, she's female. And Chang will have this sort of upstart, fiery way of speaking because he's aspirational and Thai, not Thai Chinese, but he's poor. So it's always in play. One of the ways that Thailand, and in Thai we perpetuate hierarchy, is that education allows you to access registers of language. And that happens a lot in the book, where Chang, for example, who's from Klong Thai, which in Thai we would call Islam still, he begins to understand through his education how to speak, like literally what words to use to address someone like Det's father. And his mother could never even speak to Det's father because she couldn't properly make those sentences. And so she wouldn't, and it silences her, and, or not, and she'd be really egregious. So, that's just one way that in the book, they're always navigating these complexities.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so we do have a question. Every country seems to have a different point of view of past political events. There are different versions of the same events. I'd like to ask if you have given the time to study conflicting views.
Of the events in my novel?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, very much. I mean, so yeah, 73 to 76 is this huge student movement. The dominant narrative I grew up with is not the one I found in the archive. So I had to study conflicting views because part of what I did was dismantle mythologies that had been handed down to me, inculcated culturally. I can't say, the experience for me is like, I think you've been raised within a religion very faithfully, and then you one day, and this is part of my Brown training. I mean, once you see something, you can't really unsee it, and your mind can continue to grapple with something, even though you're like, no, I don't, that's really, I don't want to touch that. Um, so yeah, I definitely had to do that. And it's not like there's one standard, easy version of what happened either, because what happened was so repressed. But there were a lot of students involved. They wrote memoirs. Some of them have become prominent academics in the US where we have freedom of press. I can write about that. Um, and and yeah, that the narrative within Thailand is also changing. The internet is part of what's done that. So the gates are open in that sense.
Okay, the next question is, when you wrote the book, did you envision it being a book to educate around Asian culture, Thai society, and politics? What was your mission behind writing the book?
I wanted my first heartfelt wish, which I mean, although in English you wouldn't be so sincere, but in Thai you would, was actually to make Thai people feel seen. Um, and some of the old activists I interviewed, so many of them were just like, no one will care. No one cares in Thailand. Why would they care outside of Thailand? And I was like, I think it's very significant. I view these events as the key that once you've read this, you understand contemporary Thailand in a different way. You understand recent protests in Thailand. It unlocks a lot. So I really wanted Thai people actually to feel seen and to feel like their work wasn't just forgotten. And then, yeah, if I've definitely been hearing, and I'm really thrilled to hear that people are really excited to learn more. An interesting subset of audience are Thais who are educated in international schools, as I was, and they've been really keen on this because it's in English, and yet it's their history, and so they're really finding their affinity and connecting things that they've heard with. In my book, I really set out like what happened very clearly.
Okay, this is about Brown, I think. As half Thai, half white American person at Brown, what support did you find? Thinking about who you were when you were starting, how do you identify with aspects of the personalities displayed by Det, Lek, Kai, and Dao?
Oh, someone's read the book. Thank you for the question. Brown was so formative to my journey, and in terms of my racial identity, I guess, which is what this question's getting at. A small example: I started Brown. I didn't use Sunisa, which is my real name, but I had been taught that it's too hard to say in English. And right away, I think I know who said it to me, or one of the people who did, but it was a person of color who helped get my suitcases out of the car, like, um, and yeah, they said, Sunisa's so beautiful. And I was like, oh, but no one can say that. And they were like, no, that's okay. You can ask people to say your name. Right there, that was the beginning of kind of a reclaiming of me, like starting to think about the ways that I've been taught to make things easier for Westerners or people speaking in English. I definitely, it was called the Third World Center then. I definitely was like really involved in that, and like I'm just going to name drop Brown things now, but visions, and that was a really big part of my journey. And then towards the end, Hapa Club, which was for biracial students, multiracial, all of that was really also a part of me understanding that I wasn't just an anomalous mixed race kid, that there are lots, and that we can claim our cultures, we can share that. This is all very powerful because particularly at that age, belonging is really important, and your sense of belonging within an academic community like Brown.
Yeah. Have you been back recently, Sunisa? I mean, before this?
Recently, I went back for my tenure. And I can't wait to get back again, but yeah.
Come back.
Mhm.
Okay. How did you make the decision to tell the story of these 3 years of student protest in a work of fiction? Oh, this is a great question. As opposed to another form, what possibilities did this open up for you?
Originally I wanted to write something contemporary in fiction about power and opportunity in Thailand. I think about that a lot because my family are Thai Chinese on that side, immigrants, and I realized that it wasn't politically safe to do so. So then I was sort of rummaging around, being like, okay, well, can I put some of these ideas in the past? And this period became really a vehicle, and I got really into it for its own reasons. But I could say things about the '70s that could remain fictional, and it is, and yet they're so relevant. And I was always commenting on contemporary Thailand. And then I've used this in Thai, but it also gives me the card to be like, to say, oh, sorry you feel that way. I wasn't even alive then. I don't know. I just, and this is where I'm using gender and youth as something to hide behind, right? But that has also been helpful for me because if it was contemporary, I think I might catch more flack for it.
Okay, this is another, it sounds like this person has also read it. In the book, we see how Persert speaks to debt toward the end when it's clear that debt is not needed. Persert yells, "You people telling those like me what to do," just before he kills him. How do you see Persert's anger in our world today? What can we do against hatred that comes from a scarcity mentality?
Yeah, I mean, a serious theme through the book, debt is the one whose inability is how the characters who do not come from immense privilege react to his privilege and his sense in debt, particularly of noblesse obligée, of this, he is always trying to take care of people and variously, usually they find it patronizing, sometimes welcome. That's a spectrum. Yeah, I see that it is very emblematic of the tensions today. There's a part in the book that talks about why debt radicalizes. Again, he's immensely privileged. Um, and there are plot reasons why he radicalizes, but the emotional reason, which doesn't give anything away, is he misses one of the big student protests and he realizes that someday the people outside will come for him and either he can take the walls down and there are literal walls guarding his estate, or he could be standing on the other side already. And when I was digging around for my research, I learned that some members of the nobility radicalized, and I found that so moving. I did hear in American publishing that people tended to feel like, do we have to follow the highborn character? Who cares? But I honestly think that the change, it's more meaningful if all, it's not a stretch to know why someone who's poor would radicalize, but those who have so much, that's more interesting. And so I really wanted debt in there because I think that lasting change, particularly in a small country like Thailand, depends on people like debt giving up some of their privileges and consciously working so that others can have more.
You've referred to the book as your first baby. Is there a connection with your writing about Dao's pregnancy and your own journey into motherhood?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I could have written about pregnancy and labor, which is in the book, with without having gone through it. Um, to connect it to women's issues, Lek is Chinese Thai immigrant from Bangkok, and she succeeds in part because she's very conscious about how to play the game, which is a gendered game, and she plays it very well. There are parts in the book where people meet her and they go, "Oh, she doesn't even sound Chinese," which of course is insulting, but they mean it to be a compliment. Dao is a character in the Thai countryside who isn't even playing. And when Lek and Dao meet, it's really profound for Lek because she recognizes that Dao is so free to be herself. And I just, plot, 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 plot. But it was so beautiful to me that Dao got to be pregnant. And because, yeah, that the character who's female and free exhibits, she just follows her own nature wherever she wants to go. And I found labor to be a lot of things, among which I had never really felt that strong. And so for Tao particularly, I wanted to give her that experience of strength. And I love The Woman Warrior by Maxine Hong Kingston, but I really have always thought that phrase describes mothers more than young women coming of age. So yeah.
The next question is, what is next on the horizon for you?
Working on a new book slowly. I've been teaching this year, which was like really a long year as a teacher. One thing is, so this might be interesting for you, as an artist, publishing this book was such a process. It was really horrible because it almost didn't make it out the door. And I got to, though, figure out what I was in it for. And I think if I was in it for publication and the glory, of which there is almost none, I would have stopped. But art making really for me like processes stuff. It's like such a deep, long, ruminative space. Novels take a long time. Teaching, I find, is like the social justice in the world part. Instead of sailing away as a novelist, which I seriously could do, teaching keeps me anchored. I find young people so tender. But yeah, I need to work on a book that hopefully gets published in the States, because I can't really teach in the States without it. And that's really hard, because the way I see it, of course, is that it's not my fault that this book isn't in the States, and that it yeah. So I'm wrestling with the next book. It's not researched because I really needed a break. Although I do like research a lot. I'll probably go back. But I wanted to write something short and contemporary, and that could spring entirely from my mind, like Athena. Like, boom, here it is.
Sunisa, I just want to pick up for a second. If you could just give, maybe some people don't know why it wasn't published in the States. I don't know if you could just give a little insight into that.
I mean, there's not exactly an easy answer, but the one that I will say is that I think there are some feelings that, we got requests like, could we put an American character who goes to Thailand, who brings the American over, or, that we needed a bit more explaining. I think, frankly, it's hard for me as the woman of color from Thailand to say it, but it just felt like some racist stuff to me. Racist in the way of like structural barriers to a story. I think I was a little naive. I was thinking of Things Fall Apart, Half of Yellow Sun, Pachinko. I was like, okay, you just write your epic novel, and as long as it's well written and those sentences hold, it'll fly. And that's not actually true. So yeah, I think that's why it didn't sell.
Yeah. So
but it did in Asia.
Yeah. Okay. What advice do you have for others who are interested in writing? What outlets do you go to for your inspiration? And do you have favorite books or authors you turn to?
Others who are interested in writing. Someone told me this was really true. If you could do anything else, do. Seriously, hobbyist is different. And if you're really interested, I would just develop a writing practice. It's one of the things I loved about BCFA, which is a remote program. It meant that you're at home, working your day job with your kid, whatever, configuration you have. But I think that the idea that you will get plucked into this like beautiful, perfect artist life isn't realistic today in America, or maybe ever. And so like developing a practice that works for you, that you like sneak your hours. For me, that's in the morning. I don't bring my phone into my office. I turn off the internet. There's some very basic things you can do. A lot of writers I love. Actually, someone I read at Brown, I would recommend is Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangarembga. And she's a Zimbabwean writer, and the novels, Nervous Conditions was published, I think in 84, 85. So it was Rhodesia then. But that's the first of a trilogy. And the third I'm literally reading right now is This Mournable Body. This came out in 2020, and it follows the same two female characters, they're cousins. And it's basically the post-colonial history of Zimbabwe. It's really, really beautiful. I think often about why this book didn't get what like the Ferrante, Neapolitan novels did, like how we want certain ideas, like Italy, how fun, even if Naples is gritty or whatever, but that like the pain of this country coming out of colonization might not be it, but I admire them very much. I think there's a lot in this. And I read the first novel, Nervous Conditions, in a class with Ama Ataidu at Brown. So yeah, fun.
What does this book mean to you personally with finding your voice and having a voice for political advocacy?
It meant a lot to me personally. You know, I found it to be really affirming. There was a period, 2016 to like 2020, which is a long time, where it wasn't selling, and I was like, okay, this isn't going to work. That was really hard, but I have so many political opinions, clearly. And someone asked earlier why fiction. Not all of my writing is so political, but I think fiction is such a strong vehicle for changing minds and expanding hearts. More so, you know, at Brown, I did a lot of journalism, but as someone from Thailand, I started to read journalism, white people who didn't even live in Thailand, who would sort of just like come in and be like, this is how it happened. And they get so much wrong. And then I started to think, of course, about what, you know, our perceptions like. Anyway, I find fiction to be very true in a way that nonfiction, if it's aiming for, you know, some sort of like capital T truth, I think we need to debunk that idea, and we have in the academy. But yeah, that's why I go into fiction, and I found that this first book has been really affirming of my right to do that, because we all have the right to do that. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever, this is just sort of my follow-up, Sunisa, did you ever have a point during that time where you wished this particular book wasn't going to be the first book, or did you just feel like this is going to be it and it has to be?
I think that I probably should have let go of it and like, okay, that's cool. I'll go write the next book. Because this might be my second book in the States or something someday. But I really wouldn't give it up, which is interesting. I guess the conviction that it's good, and that in that way, maybe it's like your babies, but you're kind of like, no, you know, I just couldn't. So I'm glad I found a home in Asia, and that it seems like found the right first home there, because it's doing so well. Um, yeah, I did learn a lot through this process, and I think I'll be able to persevere more just because of the combination of things that has happened to me already. Although, yeah, I can't emphasize enough how hard it was. In part too, to see my peers, you know, we read each other's manuscripts, we all signed agents at the same time, we all got the same fellowships, and yet it's like standing on a field watching all these rocket ships go off and being like, oh, but not mine. Better go back and test it. That was a really hard period.
Yeah, yeah. We often see student protests at Brown. Did you participate in protesting when you were at Brown? Why or why not? Do you have any advice for young people to put their political energy into positive change?
I don't think I did any formal protesting, although right around now I'm going to totally draw a blank on like big protests. I'm thinking protesting the administration. I'm not sure if that's what you mean. I went to Brown when Ruth Simmons was there, and people used to stand and applaud when she crossed the quad. Certainly, there were really contentious things. I remember when she, I think it was called the Slavery and Justice Commission, and the New York Times was like writing her up as this, you know, outlaw radical. I mean, Brown was doing the protest-worthy things, and I learned a lot from that, like watching Ruth as a student, which is, you know, I'm really glad I was there to see her defend the need to examine Brown's roots in slavery. And that is not radical now, but, you know, this was so out there then. And of course, as she said, as a Black woman, she couldn't be the president of an institution founded on money from slavery without interrogating that. I really encourage it. I think it's really healthy to engage in, obviously, I mean, but to engage in political protest, and also to figure out for yourself. Again, I think in liberal circles, we don't talk enough about values and what guides us. And of course, it used to be mostly a religious framework for me. It still is as a Buddhist, but we don't talk about that. And I think, you know, when you come into your adulthood, which can take like a decade, it's worth really digging into that and spending time with that, because that will guide you for the rest of your life, hopefully. So.
Did you get, this must be for publishing, did you get any political pushback for publishing the book, since publishing the book?
No, although I thought I would. Right before the book went to press, I think you won't mind me telling you, but Brabda Yuen, who blurbed the book and is a Thai writer I respect immensely, he reached out and he was like, it's going to get banned. And I was like, you think, and he was like, definitely. But the censors don't read in English typically, and it's in print, so it's hard to Google scan. But because the book was published literally in the midst of a protest movement, which moved the goalposts so far beyond what my book had said, I think obviously something could still happen, but I'm much safer than I would have been without this protest movement. And it's not about me, but I'm just saying, I think what's exciting about that for me is that students, young people today in Thailand see how unequal it is, right? Like I might have decided to write a novel about it, but the problem is there for everyone to see. And I think that is part of what translates hopefully into the US or other countries where, thinking about opportunity and your place within that matrix, that's a really important duty, I think, of every citizen.
Are there other moments in Thai history that you think would make good novels?
Oh, goodness.
I don't know if this person is asking for ideas or.
Yeah, Leslie's still here. Someone's in here who's an academic trained at Cal. We've talked about this, but you're welcome to take the idea too, anyone else. But the reign of Rama V, he in Thai mythology is credited with saving Thailand from being colonized, which I think is partly correct, partly hagiographic. But I'm interested in his wives. I'm interested in the inner palace. Yeah, someone biracial, I think I'd like to write more about that experience in Thailand. I'm interested in old Thai houses. This is very specific. And there's one family story. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that someone asked where I get ideas. For me, it'll be digging around. Geraldine Brooks once said this, and I find that to be true. Like when you find a story that's too good to be true, and you're just like, no way. I like to then build a whole book around it. So yeah, lots there.
Great. There's no more questions coming in, but I just want to take a quick moment and say, is there any question? I know you've had a few interviews now. Is there any question that you really wish someone would have asked you that you haven't gotten to answer yet?
Wow, that's great. Oh gosh, not that I can think of, but what do
and another question just came in. If you want to, yeah. Have you been mentored, and how are you a mentor to others?
I feel like I've not been so lucky in my mentors. I'm gonna put that out there as like a call to mentorship. Although, yeah, I did feel very mentored at Brown, but I guess I could use a mentor who's like a writer of color. Oh my God, because going through that and is really hard on your own. I believe in mentorship a lot. I was part of a team that helped start a program at Brown around mentoring women. Hello. And I just think it's one of the things I learned from growing up in Asia that's around like intergenerational, like these beautiful friendships and auntyhood that you can draw upon that are outside of your family network, particularly, when you might not come from a family that can meet you in your passions or your career. So yeah, I think it's hugely important. And I think that I would encourage women of color particularly to just ask. I think that's where I've fallen down. Just like approach and ask for what you want, for the relationship, for tea. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so here comes some book recommendation requests. Would you name some of the books that you were thinking of when you said that some good books in Thai have been translated into English?
Oh my gosh. So I brought it right here so that I'd be ready. The cover is not the best, but the book is amazing. It's called Letters from Thailand by Bosman and translated by Susan Kepner, who's also at Cal. It's a masterpiece. I read this and felt almost offended, where I was like, what the hell? It's one of those books that is so fresh and lively, that you're just like, oh yeah, and you're instantly in this world of Chinese immigrants to Thailand. I think it's amazing. This is not a new book, but yeah, this is the one that I would say, if you want to know more, just look at how many marks I've made.
What do you think of the rise in popularity in the US of Asian American writers? Who are some of your current favorites?
Oh, I love it, of course. Yeah, I'm really into it. I think that the original title, this is going to relate, of this book was The Quiet Kingdom. And I think generally, it was ironic, generally Asians in America are viewed to be quiet in a way that is so like belittling. And I'm glad that some Asian Americans at least are getting their more than moment in the sun, you know, but just that like, look at the house on fire. Like there's so much there. And yeah, wow. I'm looking at my bookshelf. Minor Feelings, nonfiction by Kathy Park Hong. You know, I really recommend for people finding their way around it. I love Shruti Swami's short stories. I think she is a total master of the form and uses it in really crazy ways. I don't write short stories. I just read Shruti's. I love, wow. I love also short stories. Mimi Locke, Last of Her Name, came out from Kaya Press 2019, maybe? Recently. It's really, really, really good. I love Little Gods by Mung Jin. She's a really cerebral, intellectual writer. I'm always curious to know what her mind is going to make in the novel form. Yeah, I could go on, but
well, there's one more, I think. Can you comment on being a minority within a minority, meaning Thai within the diaspora of Asian American?
yeah, it's hard. There aren't many Thais in the US, and America didn't fight a war formally in Thailand. They just staged the Vietnam War out of Thailand and Laos. And so I think there's always a sense of like fighting for recognition and place that's exacerbated by being biracial, you know. Usually monolingual people ask me, so are you really fluent in Thai? Um, but I also, and the thing about, you know, oppression is that it's also like a gift, you know. I love being biracial and being able to access both and having this kind of unique, not just to me, but a little unique view. It gives me so much to write about, and it forces me to grow when I'm not being like torrentially covered in bricks. And yeah, it has been a little lonely sometimes, in a lot of ways. But the first novel is really helping with that because it's given me, people talk about platform, but it's more like a coming out party of who I am and what my mind has been doing all these years in the library, you know. And so I'm starting to meet my people that way.
I was thinking like you find your people with that first book.
Yeah.
And the related question is, what does it mean for you to be part of the Brown Women's Network? Can you comment on how you build strong relationships with Brown at Brown?
Yes. I mean, it's just, I kind of am like, God, it's sometimes a little embarrassing, but a lot of my close friends are Brown alums, you know, and I mean that like we were roommates at Brown, like then, and in the most profound sense, you know, godmother of my child. But that also as a mom to a young child, you know, like recent mom friends are still Brown alums because there's a lot in the Bay Area, and it gives us this point of connection and relating that's just it's tremendous. I didn't have like the greatest high school experience. Didn't go to an academically selected place. You know, Thailand, it was hard to access books when I was in high school. So Brown also for me, I think, was this place where I got to just like the movies, just be like so challenged. But people weren't competitive. And so I got to be my fullest self without feeling squashed intellectually or in terms of identity. It's really special.
What a great place to end on. Thank you so much, Sunisa. I'm going to turn it over to Leah Kadavi, co-chair of the Women's Leadership Council. Did I get that right? For closing remarks.
Thank you, everyone. And again, hello, I'm Laya Kajavi, co-chair of the Women's Leadership Council, member of the class of 1984, and proud parent of a member of the class of 2023. On behalf of the Brown Women's Network, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Sunisa and Mary Kim for being with us today to talk about Sunisa's debut novel and how important work like this come together. Congratulations on your second edition. It's also fascinating to see how you created this beautiful work, this labor of love, your coming out party by bridging your research-driven discipline with your personal, emotional, and spiritual journey while internalizing racial dualities and so eloquently narrating the political, social, and cultural complexities of your home country. We look forward to your new book and having you back to talk about that. The Brown Women's Network, with the guidance of the Women's Leadership Council, continues to offer virtual programming and other opportunities. So please be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Twitter for updates. We feature stories and more. We also really value your feedback. So please take a moment to fill out the survey that's in the chat box. And we hope to be able to have you join us at our next virtual event on June 8th. It's featuring faculty spotlight on Dr. Christine Montrose. She's an associate professor of psychiatry and human behavior at Brown's Warren Alpert Medical School. Registration information is also available in the chat box. Thank you all again and have a great afternoon and a great Memorial weekend.